We
Awesome.
have Dr. Paika, but my friend Mohammed. Um, it's such a pleasure to have you on AyAyAyAi, where where
Ay, ay,
we,
ay,
we
ay, ay, ay.
thank you for that because what we discuss, we bring a lot of enthusiasm into the discussion because we have such a variety of topics that we can discuss, and it's always a pleasure to have somebody unique such as yourself. And I'll explain that as we get started. But um, welcome to AI.
Ay, 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 ay. I had to say that. So, thank you very
Yes,
much, Asif, for having me on this show and podcast. And I've known you for some time now, so um, it's a pleasure to be on and to speak with you. And let's get started.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Tell us
yeah.
about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I live in Texas currently. I grew up in New Mexico. Currently, I work as a physician in Texas, but my family immigrated from India back in the 80s. So I've been here for close to 40 years now. I was a little kid when I came here. So
Okay.
we relocated to Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's where I started second grade essentially, and then went all the way, through college and did my degree in computer engineering. Graduated from the University of New Mexico, and then I worked at. In the meantime, I was between right before graduation. I was working at IBM. I did a 6 month term there in Tucson, Arizona, and after I graduated, I got a job with Honeywell Defense Avionics Systems in Albuquerque. So my specific job was to work on. I was a programmer doing programming in C++, and we were actually designing cockpit displays for the F-18 fighter jets. And then we had other programs at Honeywell. We were part of the Crusader program as well, and a lot of these uh, other programs that were used in Operation Desert Storm and places like that. So yeah, so that's what I did initially. Did that for a couple of years, and then after that, I kind of had a mind change. I decided to pursue medicine, and I went offshore to med school and went to an island in Dominica, and I went to Ross Medical University there. And it was 16 months on the island, a very grilling course there. After 16 months on the island, I relocated to Miami for a semester and then New York, and that's where I did all my clinical rotations. And then after the rotations, I went on to do my residency in internal medicine in Albany, New York. And then after that, I came back to New Mexico and worked for a few years. In the interim, I got married, and then my wife was doing her residency at UT Southwestern here. So I ended up relocating here for that, and then we just ended up staying here because we love Texas. Yeah. So we've been here for about 12 years now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So this is what I mean by
yeah.
unique, right? Because I spoke to a lot of people, in a lot of different profession, and of course, you're unique in the sense that uh, I respect you overall because you're a family man, very good guy. You have so many talents, but all of them are so interconnected, interweaving because you're also a musician, right? Let's not forget that. Let's not forget that you're a physician who's also a computer engineer guy who has developed solution using code and you diagnose patients, but you also treat them with music. Tell us a little bit about your music background as well.
I haven't treated patients yet with music, but
I
that
think you
is a
should
field. That's a
talk to
field
them.
on its own. Yeah, music therapy has been used and is currently being used in Europe, areas of Europe. So people are actually using music to heal cancer patients, and it's found to have positive results. So because music in itself stimulates certain areas of your brain and produces a sense depending on what you're listening to, it can actually change your mood. So if you're listening to something happy, you can actually go into that happy mood. If you're listening to something angry, you can go into an angry mood too. So it could be used for positive and negative things. So I tend to use music for to spread love, um, and to spread happiness, and also love between a spouse and family members, things like that. So my music has more of a lovey type of feeling. I do speak about what's going on in the world sometimes, and those are kind of my thoughts. That I just music is a good avenue to put all of your thoughts together and just give it out in a nice form rather than giving a lecture. So you kind of just do something with music in that regard. But yeah,
Yeah,
I've been involved with music since childhood. I come from a family of musicians. My uncle was actually a singer from back home, back in India, and he used to perform. So we kind of used to sing a lot, do a lot of karaoke events at our house while growing up. So I was exposed to music at a very, very early age, and it was just kind of like bread and butter for us. Whenever we had a party, we had music. So
right.
it was like our alcohol in a way. It's like so. But yeah, no. Tell me about yourself. You have a very interesting history yourself, and I know you were in the military and
That's right.
for a while. And so, tell me a little bit about yourself and where
Yeah.
you're coming from and why you moved here and things like that.
I think I'm gonna answer this question with a little bit of connections that we've developed, which is that um, I saw your enthusiasm for music, and I think you kind of got me thinking about music differently, and that's what I really do appreciate about you because you're a musician and kind of got me to think like, okay, I don't really do music that much, but maybe I should because it's a way to release the energy or express yourself differently, sort of kind of exploring that energy that you have from doing all these other things. But when you do music, you feel that other part of your brain energized, right? And I felt that because we do karaoke's and where you are singing your love music, and here I am playing Metallica, and all of a sudden there's like, what are you doing playing Metallica? But I felt the energy because I was like, oh man, I do like singing actually, and I want to sing more of it. So that's the first thing I would say that makes you very unique because you have all these way to channel yourself, and I don't think I'm that different, but I completely am in a different spectrum because, like you said, I went to the military and I did mainly law enforcement and a lot of investigation, work in anti-terrorism. So the human aspect, the brain matters that you discussed earlier. I look at it from a different perspective, maybe from like some sort of psychological frame rather than a treatment of the body of the patient. So from that exposure, it kind of led me into understanding that artificial intelligence is not here today, but if it's not here today, we will have so much of this mundane work that we will have to do without being really creative about it, right? The
Right.
human creativity is what's lacking without artificial intelligence. And what does artificial intelligence do? It opens us up to do all the other things that we can do without actually attending to the task that takes up so much of our time and energy. So artificial intelligence is not necessarily what I was thinking about when I was in the military, but I've seen a lot of those capabilities, and I'll specifically say drone operations, which in the Air Force is very much known for drone operation. Navy has drone operation. Marine Corps has drones. Army has drones. Everybody has drones, but they all have different sort of applications, right? So my last leg in the military, where I really seen a lot of the drone operations. I really thought about it from the perspective of how to secure ourselves from the drone, right? Because when we use drone, how do we secure ourselves from the drone is something that really made me think a lot, right? And so when I got out of the military, I ended up doing cybersecurity. I ended up working on data, like a lot of data collections, data acquisition, which feeds into the machine learning and AI system. But I think one thing I never mentioned to you is that I'm on my fifth startup at this point, right?
Oh wow,
Um,
awesome.
fifth startups outside of
Yep.
everything I just mentioned, right? So that's what I do to burn the midnight candles, right?
Wow.
To figure out, like, what sort of ideas interest me, and if I was to go through this startup, what would I learn from it, and how would it end up? Has always been my creative, inquisitiveness of how would this product end up being, and how would I be involved in that product development. So um, all in all, I've went through 5 probably in since 2016. Because when I was in the military, I was super heavy on the mission, but when I got out, I started exploring things as far as to say, like, how would I do things differently from what I've seen in the military? You
Hmm.
know, my most recent one that was actually near to the drone operation was motion intelligence. Is to understand the context of a scenario using video feedback, right? Video feed,
Hmm.
to understand what's happening around a content that we're focused on, but what's the context around it, which is that geospatial side of things, where you have to understand, is there a cat flying in the air, or is that cat walking on a surface, and what is the surface like? What's the relation between the surface and the cat? Now, if you think about it from the perspective of a drone, drones have to understand those things very much, as it's trying to make a decision. We have a lot of those things going on where the drones are being enabled for decision making without the humans being involved. Um, that has a bad or good sides to it, and we can get into it later on. But these drone operations are really picking a lot of interest around the world, but they're being explored heavy-handedly on one side, not the other side. Um, but I'll stop right there because XGen AI is my recent co-founded XGen AI to address the education side of things when it comes to artificial intelligence, and of course the psychology side of things as well, which is that, how do we feel psychologically safe when we have some things like artificial intelligence that threatens us, or that can provoke our uh, uh, dark side, if I may say so,
Sure.
with some information that we might not otherwise run into. So I'm going to stop right there. I want to hear your thoughts on these topics because we have tons to cover. But let's get back to you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like you've been part of so many startups, and also you're interested in drones and drone technology. So, and did you use? Were you operating drones in the military when you were in the military? Okay. Well,
Yeah,
and how long ago was that? Like,
that was back in 2013.
okay, so now I'm
Yeah,
sure the technology has advanced to a
far more,
significant
far
point.
more.
So yeah,
Yeah,
and now I have a drone myself, obviously that I use for recreational purposes. But drones are being used to deliver products to people's houses now, right? So,
yeah.
um,
Medicine, blood samples.
yes,
In
all
Africa,
kinds
they
of
have
things.
actually drones that goes out to people's house and
Yeah,
provides them with necessary kits that they need in order to take care of themselves without visiting a doctor.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, even here in Dallas, you have certain companies that are providing groceries, grocery delivery, even here in
right.
certain areas of Dallas, in
Yeah,
Frisco, I
yeah,
believe.
yeah.
So that's
That's
something that's going to
robotics,
get
right?
even stronger as things go along, I believe. Um, but yeah, AI has basically caught everyone's eye and mind and soul over the last couple of years, and it's
Yeah,
rapidly evolving so
sure.
rapidly that we can't even fathom what's going to happen in the near future. So AI is affecting every single field, and it's helping people process things a lot quicker than they were able to in the past, right? So,
Yeah,
and in the field of medicine, it's also found to be helpful, but also harmful at times, because if you get the wrong sources, for example, if a patient looks up they use chat gpt and they're looking up something, and sometimes chat gpt sources incorrect sources too, and also may provide an incorrect overall picture of a medical condition. And so each patient has to be seen as an individual, right? And you're kind of treating the person instead of the numbers in a way. So what AI is doing for doctors, and if I could speak a little bit about that, is it's helping physicians to understand illness, right, and to limit their kind of burdensome work. So it's helping in, pre-authorizations, billing purposes, also in scribing. So as a physician, I understand that I've experienced that we spend a lot of time writing notes and charting, and even after seeing patients all day long, 8 to 10 hours, you're going home and charting for 2 to 3 hours or 4 hours. And so, actually, believe it or not, 70% of our time as physicians is spent in reviewing lab results, charts, imaging, and doing our notes, progress notes, H&Ps, and discharge summaries. And only 30% is spent in actually seeing a patient face to face. So
That's
AI is
right.
helping to kind of reduce that burden of and give good quality of life to physicians, because physicians are getting burned out and a lot of them are quitting, especially primary
That's
care physicians. So
right.
depending on their workload.
That's
So um, and in regards to the fitness industry and healthcare industry, they kind of go hand in hand. And believe it or not, 70% of Americans are overweight.
That's right.
Yeah. So we have what, 330 million Americans. So just imagine 70% of them, greater than 230 million, are obese, or sorry,
Right.
overweight. And
That's
40% of Americans are actually in the obesity class 1 category with a
right. Mm.
BMI of greater than 30.
Yeah.
And so, and that's only going to get worse. So you could see where healthcare and medicine are going to become more important, and AI is going to help in regards to that in the near future. So they're predicting that close to 2030, we will have 1 out of 2 people will be overweight in America.
Wow.
So close to 50%. And
Wow.
that's a problem because obesity is a risk factor for medical conditions, as you know, diabetes, heart disease, sleep apnea, cancers, right? So
Right.
obesity is a problem which is
That's right.
spreading everywhere due to our sedentary life, um, and lack of movement. And so they're trying to tackle this through AI, and it's correlated because if you have a person that is not well overall, if they're out of shape or whatever, then you've given rise to all these medical conditions that they probably shouldn't have had, because that first step was not um, dealt with. And so we can talk a little bit more about this, about how robotics can help us to kind of prevent medical conditions from showing up in the near future. Do you have any
I,
questions?
yeah, I think what you're discussing, and I'm looking at the side effect, right? I think me and you discussed the medicine, and medicine will have all the side effects. So here's the AI side effect that I'm thinking of as I'm speaking it. What I've seen in my journey, um, just me or people that I have interacted with about artificial intelligence, what they start realizing about this artificial intelligence is that as they explore and scratch the surface of AI, what they realize about is their own intelligence, right? Because this AI is literally mimicking the way we are as an intelligent being, right? So this ecosystem that lives within us has an ecosystem that is creating a feedback within this ecosystem, right? There's two ecosystem, but all aligned into one. And the food that we eat, interactions that we have outside, people that we are interacting with, the maybe a trail that's next to your house, the way you interact with that trail. This the dive into artificial intelligence brings a little bit closer to ourselves, and that's a side effect of here I am trying to figure out this new technology. All of a sudden I'm realizing what it is that I need, or I'm lacking, or what it is that I already have, and how I can do more with what I have, which is that augmentative intelligence side of AI, right? Because if you're thinking about what you just said about fitness, right? What if there was an AI that didn't keep us in front of our laptop and computers, and it was doing the work for us, as in we were doing the work already? And that gives us the opportunity to go outside for a walk for a little bit, go out into a trail and use our muscles to climb up the rough terrains, right? What if this augmentative intelligence did so much of our work that we were actually lifting and shifting things on our own, right? Rather than insisting on a robot that will come and uh, be our assistant in our house, right? uh, those are some of the things that I personally have experienced as, and your brain goes into so many different directions because so many solutions you could have if there was a robotic in the house. But what if there was no need for a robotic? Because instead of a robotics doing it, I could do those things because I don't have to really worry about what it is that I do today. What would I do with all the time that AI opens up for me, right? And you mentioned Chat GPT in your discussion. What if what if Chat GPT is helping me ask those questions and develop my questioning style, because ChatGPT interacts with you based on your communication. So I don't know if you've seen anybody talk about the fact that somebody was getting snazzy with ChatGPT. All of a sudden, ChatGPT was getting a little, picking on them, right? So kind of like having the interaction.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but it's a matter of how do we reflect ourselves on ChatGPT, and how do we reflect on this future AI that's coming down the pipeline, and how do we reflect with the robots that will be far more relevant in our lifestyle than it is today. And I always, of course, said the drone piece already. That if you look at that drone, where it's been to where it is today, we're not seeing drones everywhere, right? But we are seeing ChatGPT everywhere. We are seeing AI everywhere, and eventually we will see these robots that Tesla, Boston Dynamic, even Amazon is pushing out. We will see more and more of these, right? So we kind of have to approach it with an educated mindset to say this is not about what they do; it is about what we do, and how we do things is what they will replicate and mimic, right? Um,
Yeah,
so I'm going to
yeah,
stop right there. That was the thought process that I had, because I think there's a whole lot happening, but we are to educate ourselves with the obesity piece, right? Like, if you're overweight, what's causing that overweight? Is it just that, the food? Is it that, your mental health? Is it whatever it is? Like, you have to explore the full spectrum. And what gives you time is AI, like, because AI does so much of your work that now you have time to think about all this stuff.
yeah. I agree, and very good points in regard in what you just said was very, very good and very important. And I totally agree. Um, and we have to have a holistic approach
That's
to,
right.
as you just said, why people are obese. It could be that they're undergoing a mental condition. They may be depressed. Sometimes that can cause you to, and that's where, if we're asking the right questions, as you said, to AI, then we're going to get the right answers. And humans are now becoming more inquisitive about everything since
Very
AI
true.
has come into play, since technology has advanced, since the world has become one in a way. So we're asking questions not only about medicine, but about our past, right? We're asking questions about religion, for example, whereas people wouldn't question their faith. You have so many people that are actually questioning the formation of religion back in the days, and why did things occur the way they did, and why are people still practicing things the way they did thousands of years ago, and is
Right.
it of any use for us today? Because
Right.
that's something AI is helping us with, right? Because, and we're not, obviously we're not going to go too much into detail, but we're looking at archaeology findings of past cultures, and turns out that many cultures were actually very advanced, more advanced than we thought, and
Right.
they're no longer there.
Right.
But we could see other things from these cultures, and we can understand that they had certain practices that kept their culture alive. And you had formations of these different religious groups, and through time that helped their culture to survive and maintained peace among people. So not only will AI help us as human beings to, think about our health and, medical aspect, but even about holistically, what are we doing as human beings, in terms of, law, how do we change the negative points aspects of society? And people are asking the right questions. And I agree with you on that. They're actually we're asking questions from the deep thoughts of our mind. We
Right.
wouldn't even ask this to anyone else, but when we're in front of Chat GPT, we're thinking of things that we wouldn't even say in public, right? You want to know. Humans are getting more inquisitive about, what they need to do and how they need to do it. So, yeah, I mean, time will only tell. Any
I
thoughts?
yeah. I just want to point out that the other day I was having some discussions internally with a small team, and I told them, look, what has changed since ChatGPT is that now if I have to do 1 hour of anything before that hour starts, I'm in ChatGPT asking ChatGPT how to spend that rest of the hour in order to do what it is I'm doing. So even if it's a mundane task of creating an Excel sheet, I'm asking ChatGPT first.
Yeah,
It goes back to that Thomas Edison's famous saying that if I have to do anything, I'll think about it for 55 minutes and do it in the last 5 minutes, right? I think about it a lot and then I do it in 5 minutes. And I think ChatGPT has kind of given me that shift in perspective. It's like, well, yeah, I'm about to do what I'm about to do, but whatever it is that I've done thousands of times, how can I go to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT, I'm about to do this simple Excel sheet. What do I need to know? And
sure.
ChatGPT gives me all this perspective, and I say, majority of them I know, but this last piece I really am didn't even consider that, right? So one of the ways I've been doing ChatGPT is I write a script code and plugged it into a Google Sheet, and Google Sheet being Excel, it does all of these tasks for me without me ever lifting a mouse to click through the rows and columns of a sheet, right? Literally off of script. It wrote the whole code for me just the way I would have done it step by step manually. So having ChatGPT is great. Having ChatGPT and being comfortable with ChatGPT is great. However, we still have to be human, right? We still have to be cognizant of the fact that it is a system that is not literally human brain. It's the
Yeah.
human brain that will have to make the decision on what that output from the ChatGPT is and how do we best interact with that information. Um, when when I kind of think about the human brain and how human brain evolved and processed information, so you're discussing the fact that we have kept peace, we have been in wars, and we have went through all these as part of the human history. Well, if you look at it from the perspective of a brain, right? What did brain experience, right? That brain that was a small brain and it developed and it passed away and it passed away, it turned into like back to earth again.
Yeah.
um, what did that brain's DNA pass on to the next part of the generation, and that generation, how did that brain develop again? So if you look at it from the change management perspective, history becomes not just about a bunch of stories, but it becomes that insanity of how change management has happened. How did this new brain develop? What happened to the new brain once it developed? Now something else came around and that changed the whole perspective. Now you have a different source of brain. So let's use an exact historical perspective. Let's say what's happening in Ukraine and Russia today. What happened when Genghis Khan came through Ukraine and Russia? What was that like? How did their brain react to that fear of these guys riding into horses coming from thousands of miles away? All of a sudden, we're dominated by these folks that are riding on horses, and they have no idea what language we speak. right? What was that brain's reaction to that? And how did that brain for the next generation after generation reacted to that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's happening today, I wonder about that change management. How do we help guide that change management to happen? To say there is a fear of artificial intelligence that is coming from out of nowhere. All of a sudden, it's interacting with you on your daily basis. You don't know much about it. It speaks your language, and here you are, not sure how it speaks your language actually. Because I know how you speak English, but how do I know how ChatGPT speaks English? Because ChatGPT doesn't speak English only; it speaks Polish very clearly. If you put English and Polish together, it still speaks Polish and English with you, right? How does it speak, right?
Hmm.
So we are facing a brain and change management that we have to do for our next generation and generation after that. We really have to take responsibility for that. And I don't know how, but I think education is the first piece of the start.
Yeah.
We'll find out what happens if education doesn't work out, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure education is it. You know.
Yeah. So very, very strong points that you mentioned. And we are evolving as human beings, right? So we evolve with what happened in the past, and
That's right.
the future generation learns from those mistakes, or sometimes doesn't learn, and they keep on committing the same mistakes and errors until they do learn. So
Right.
we're evolving, and we've evolved to this point that we now, are a semi-advanced civilization. And so, we are realizing that there are other civilizations out there currently in the world that are not, they're still back there, that are still not as advanced, and they're still living life the way it was lived 1,000 years ago.
That's right.
So, um, there is a facet, you know, certain human beings are more evolved than others, and they have learned through memory or history or whatever it is. The more you've been through, the more you learn, right? So
That's right.
certain areas have been through a lot more, possibly. Um, Now, I wanted to go back and talk a little bit about AI, how AI is making human beings more efficient, because you mentioned that, the first thing you do is kind of ask, Chat GPT about how to plan out the day, and that makes you more efficient. And
Right.
so AI is also helping, um, from my side, physicians as well, because let's say you're an ER doctor and you have 20 patients that are waiting in the waiting room. And now what they have is, basically, you have all these images and everything, CT scans done, and the ER doctor is looking to see as to which patient needs to be seen more urgently. So AI, using AI programs, AI can look at these images a lot quicker and tell you if this patient needs to be seen first, because, hey, this person's CT scan looks like they may have a pulmonary embolism, for example, or a blood clot that needs urgent intervention, and they could die within the next half an hour if you don't see them. So that's how AI is speeding up and making ER doctors more efficient, or can. Certain areas are testing this, like, Mayo Clinic and areas, places like that in Houston as well. So uh, I agree with efficiency. I feel AI is making us more efficient as human beings. We all are going to rely on some sort of program. Right now, it's Chat GPT. In the future, maybe something else to plan out not only our day, but maybe even our whole year, and be like,
Yeah.
hey, what do I need to be doing on this day
Right.
to accomplish this task next year?
Yeah.
And we've all, we've kind of gone through phases in the human evolution, with Facebook, and you could, post things in the future, and, 3 months in advance. We're evolving as human beings to kind of get us to the point where we are planning out our lives, our whole life. And AI, believe it or not, has the technology to tell you how long you would survive. Let's say if you have a medical condition
Mm.
and you're in the ER, in the hospital, based
Right.
on laboratory results, scans and your history, AI can give a good prediction of how long you're going to live in the hospital.
That's right.
So even it
That's
can even, foresee your death in a way.
right.
So we don't
Yeah.
even know where we're going with this.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
exciting and scary at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah. And I would say predictive analytics side of things is we've been working towards this process for so long, right? So this is nothing that's just showing up to the doorstep. It's just all happening because now we have the computing power and we have access to that computing power for very little amount of cost, right?
Yeah.
So for Mayo Clinic to have that ability to say, I'm going to look at the patient chart, which is the history of the patient, and say, today I need to make a decision based off of all this historical information. And if I have 10 minutes to make that decision, how do I pick the best outcome, which is to save somebody's lives, rather than to go after somebody who just has a headache, right? How do I make that decision? So you're using your historical context and understanding that historically put, we've had to go through the ER process where we just had to use our cognitive analysis to understand which patient to pick first.
Yeah.
Now that we have an AI, what happens with AI? Well, with AI, you make a decision, but you are saving more lives than previously possible. And previously, you couldn't even get that information of how many people did you actually save because of those decisions, right? Because you just went through life without really collecting historical data, right? And as we collected this historical data, now we are able to interact and say, this is how we approach, and this is how we save lives from now on, right? And we can actually keep measuring that possibility so that way we save more lives. And as we do that, we are able to see more patient and actually care for the patient, like you said in the very early stage of this conversation, that there's more time being spent on taking notes and understanding what happened to the patient prior to the visit and after visit, and in between, the patient time was limited to say 5 minutes, right? So how do we increase that doctor and patient conversation for longer so that way it's a human centric solution where we are looking at the patient far longer than the notes about the patient, right? Or creating new notes about the patient.
Yes. Yes.
These systems that are coming into the place, um, they will change the game that we've been playing, which is that better services we provide and more effective that we are, we can handle more. Right? We can handle more. And I think what I mean by that is that now that you have more time in your hand, what else do you do? So, do you spend more time with the patient, or do you make sure with your talent and with your educational background, you make sure the patient doesn't have to come in as frequently as they do now, right? So that way you are having remote control, uh, and did I say remote control? Remote treatment, as in, you're giving the patients these one-on-one care that you tell the patient, like, look, not only is it medicine, your lifestyle has to change. What is it like in your house? What can you change in your house that way you're a little bit more physically active? What sort of friend circle do you have? How much how much can you do with your friend circle? What sort of friend circle should you have? Not necessarily a doctor patient conversations that we have today, but if you had more time to spend with the patient, would you just prescribe a medicine and let the patient walk out and have them come back 6 times a year? Or do you give them one of those advice and say, let me come twice a year for their maybe biannual inspection or something like that, right? I'm not a doctor, so I use all this wrong terminologies. But the thing
No,
is,
you're on point. No, you're saying the right stuff. Yeah. No, doctors will agree, and they actually have committees in the hospital where I work to prevent, patients from coming back into the ER right away. There's a whole committee. It's called the readmissions committee, and they see why the patient had come back so quickly. Could we have done something differently and prevent that? And some of the steps are, maybe they need a closer follow up with their primary doctor within a week or two to make sure they're doing okay, and more frequent visits for sicker people and things like that. So prevention medicine is what we're focusing on more than anything else. Also, compliance is an issue with medicine, right? Patients are not compliant with medications and with doctor visits. So we tend to see these people in the ER. Um, but AI is helping in terms of, as we said, making things more efficient. Also, we are focusing on patients that are, uh, of higher acuity, or that need us first and foremost, so that we can focus on what's important. You may have a patient that can be seen later and can wait because they really don't have a severe problem. Maybe it's just a common cold or something like that. They just need to go home. Uh, so, uh, so it's helping us. And um, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think when you have this historical information, right, and you've seen what those historical information, how the output has happened, you consider the input that you're putting in right now with this historical information. However, there's a whole lot of thoughts that needs to happen prior to you just say like I'm just going to take all this historical information, just dump it into an input and see what the output is. Right?
Yeah,
There's lots of consideration, ethical consideration, legal consideration, and so the reason you're not seeing what in the healthcare that you would like to see is because there's lots of this thought process that we're going through in order to say like if we do AI, how do we do this AI correctly? Not just ethically, but legally also, something that we don't get in trouble for, right? So as these informations are going through a system and is being, in AI we call it model training, right? How do you train a model? And when you're training that model, what sort of data do you use? Is a very much an ethical, legal compliance that you have to meet. So you have to do a lot of due diligence. And I think as we are seeing more and more of this possibility that we can process this much data in this short amount of time, and the cost is very little, um, people are of course jumping in because hey, we have done due diligence for a long time. Now that the cost is coming down, now we can actually do these things of taking notes using a system that listens into the conversation, is able to process the notes and hand out the notes very fast and easy. And then just a quick review of that note, you can diagnose it like, oh, maybe there's a few lines missing. Let me add that into the notes, right? Or how do you keep that note so that way every time patient comes to visit, you are seeing a delta of improvement or delta of somebody who's actually probably going down in the negative direction, right? So yeah, there's a medical terminology for that. I don't know what that is, but my
yeah,
point is that we start now, right? We start that due diligence piece today, and then work ourselves into what technology that's available and do it correctly, right? Because there's a lot of privacy involved in these conversations that we're having,
yeah,
privacy concerns, right?
yeah,
I wrote a paper on safety, security, and privacy of AI, and that was our main major concern is in the healthcare side of things because
yeah,
that's very private and that's very personal. How do we uh, start the due diligence process? How do we walk ourselves through this process and say, if we were to take the notes, how do we keep it secured? And then not only is it secured um, uh, for the doctor, because the patient should be able to have access to it, and how does patient
yeah,
advocate for themselves to keep those data private, right? So that
yeah,
way, if it's not you but somebody else is the doctor or it's a nurse that's seeing it, can they see different version of that notes? Because not everything needs
yeah,
to be released to a nurse, and not everything needs to be released to a so for example a legal team if that's the case, right?
yeah,
Or somebody who just needs to see overall medical performance like a hospital manager, right? How do we give them the glimpse into what's being discussed so that way the full notes is not released but a metadata of that notes is being released. So if you look at it from that due diligence perspective, how do you start educating yourself and your staff and your whole organization so that way when we are working towards these low cost solutions and then are making those low cost solutions improve over time, how do we start in a due diligence, right? How do we educate ourselves? So there's there's this concerns that we have and they're being addressed slowly, but I think compared to 10 years ago how these concerns were there and questions were being asked, today we're picking those questions back up again and
yeah,
asking it with a different format like chat gpt style, right?
yeah,
Because now these informations are very accessible. Anybody who wants to educate themselves about like, oh, well, what's the process of developing these notes with privacy in mind, right? How do we keep HIPAA in check so that way we're not going above and beyond HIPAA, we're staying within the HIPAA guidelines, right?
yeah,
So Those are some of the thought processes I have about medical industry, but I always want to apologize. I use the wrong terminologies because I'm not a
No,
doctor or a professional.
I understand what you're saying, and patient confidentiality is
Right. There you go. That's
that's
the word.
the term that we're looking for is stressed, and we have to go through so many modules every year about HIPAA violations, patient confidentiality, and release of medical records, who to release it to, and which companies can request it, and things like that. So with the advent of EMRs, electronic medical records, things have become more transparent. So we have EMRs on our phone, and we can actually look at patients' information on our iPhone or Android phone or whatever, and that's risky because you could be in an elevator and you could have that open and someone will look at it. So it's a lot worse now than it was when I was practicing medicine in the 2000s,
Mhm.
where I had to go into the hospital and write a note in the chart. And this was, 2005, and when I was a medical student. And I remember clearly I had to actually, go there, write a note by hand, open the binder, put the note in the, and close the chart and
Mhm.
put it on a shelf. And that's it. No one had access to that besides the nursing staff and the people in the hospital, and that's it. And then if
Mhm.
anyone wanted those records, it would be a nightmare because the patients would have to go to medical records,
Right.
request medical records. They would scan those records and then
Right.
put it on a CD and mail it to the patient, or the patient will come and pick it up. Now things have changed. Patients can look up anything they want at the,
Mhm.
on their phone, and they're actually
Right.
looking at stuff before you even see the patient in the hospital. So when we go, let's say for example, I go and do my rounds, and the patient's already looking at their labs from the morning, and they're like, "Hey, why, doctor? Why is the white count high today? Or what
Right.
does this mean?" So they're asking, as you said, AI, and EMR is also sort of uh, technologically, it's semi AI. It's helping us, and it's only going to get more evolved as days go, because interpretation is going to come in, and you're going to have the EMR. Right now Epic is the most widely used EMR in the country, but I think as we go down the path here, we're going to have more of a centralized EMR. And with AI, you could potentially have interpretation of lab results, radiology, and patient background. And if you have all those three, it's more of a multimodal approach. And AI could basically give you a diagnosis, or even alert you on your phone. Hey, this morning we saw all of this. Your scan showed this. Your lab showed this. So you are at risk for this. You have this many hours to live. It could go anywhere. So that's where I feel that's where we're going. And of course, it's going to help physicians, because physicians will have this information in their hands. We're going to have information about this patient, all 20 patients. We have everything. AI has figured everything out for us. Now it's for us to come here and look at it and be like, hey, okay, so this is important. I need to go see this patient right now.
Right.
Or,
Right.
hey, maybe they're not that, sick as AI says they are. So that's something. So we still need a human
Yeah.
behind
Yeah.
all of this, because we need to interpret what AI, because AI is not there yet, obviously, right? So,
That's
but that's where I feel medicine is going and fitness is going to go. And we can talk a little bit about fitness too, but any
right.
thoughts?
No, I think we should jump into the fitness because look, as much as we focus on medicine, fitness is what's going to help. Like you said, overweight causes all these other snowball effect, right? So how do we go from where we are today without medicine, but just via fitness, maybe address some of these topics rather than say, let's just go for the medicine. Yeah, what's your thought on the fitness part?
Yeah, so as we said, obesity is growing rampantly. I mean, it's rapidly, and it's rampant, and it's a problem in the United States, and specifically in areas that don't have a lot of walking. For example, Houston, Texas, is one of the most overweight cities in America.
Mhm. Yep,
Because
yep. Most
they're
obviously,
people don't walk. They're always in a car. There's no public transportation. New York is a little bit better, right? Because you're running around to get to the subway. This and there's a lot of walking. Countries that have a lot of walking have a lower rate of obesity, and they've done studies on this. Italy, for example, has people are healthy, generally speaking, even though they're eating a lot of food, a lot of carbs, a lot of pasta, a lot of pizza, but they are
right,
walking a lot to get to
right,
places.
right.
So, you know, we need to be more active, definitely. That's one thing. But there may be, as you said before, other issues as to why we are obese. And we need to see, kind of get a more holistic approach to obesity. And back in the days, prior to 1970s or whatever, Americans were not as overweight as they are now. And with the advent of processed foods, things have changed. Post
That's
1980s, 90s, people are, eating more processed food, less natural food, and that's a huge problem. Now, and the diet industry has gone haywire, right? You have so many different diets. You got keto diet, you got uh, you know, high carb diet, low carb diet, you got all kind of vegan diets, you name it. You have every kind of diet, and studies have shown that it's okay. No specific diet really is going to change anything. It's mainly your caloric intake. So if you want to control your weight, you have to control your caloric intake, how much you're putting into your body. So that's important. So education is going to be important because people are taking, for example, if you're eating a candy bar or whatever, a bar, that's like 200-300 calories right there. Whereas you could have had a nice meal for 200-300 calories. You could have had, you know, eggs, egg whites, and a toast, and you know, th- avocado, and that would actually benefit your body and shred
right.
fat for you, and um, build muscle. So I think AI will help in education, right? Chat GPT, and it's improved the lifestyle of fitness specialists. So if you have a person that is a personal trainer, for example, they're using AI now. They're actually
That's right.
using AI. Before it was, a process. They had to calculate your BMI, and then they had to calculate your TDEE, total energy expenditure, daily energy expenditure throughout the day. And then that would be a calculation which they had to do based on your height and weight and age. And then they would formulate how many carbs you need to eat, how much protein you need to have, how much fat you need to have. And it's making life easier for personal trainers, because now all they have to do is, hey, I have a person who is 160 pounds or 180 pounds, 5'11", and 44 years old. Those are my stats, by the way. And um, can you please formulate a nutrition and workout plan? And within seconds, AI will give you a nutrition plan as to exactly what to eat.
Right.
And you tell them, I want to eat 2 meals a day, for example, or I want to eat 3 meals, and they'll tell you exactly what to. And I did that for myself as well. And there have been people who have followed the nutrition plan suggested by AI, and they've done well. They've actually
Yeah.
been able to lose weight uh, at a good level, at a progressive level. So, and also, AI is good in recommending a workout plan. Now,
Yeah.
we have certain programs that use AI that actually you could buy and put in your house, like Tonal AI or whatever. It's basically, you could get a mirror, and you have an AI robot behind the mirror,
Mhm.
and they give you certain exercises. You have a trainer on there that's giving you certain exercise, and you're doing these movements, and they are actually they're so precise. They're calculating your movements to make sure you are precise. And I'm sure you've seen this, but as a result, they're also testing your heart rate when you do these movements, and they are giving you recommendations on how many reps you need to be doing. So AI is helping individuals even on a trainer level. So that's where it's going, and it's only going to get more advanced as we go along here. And as I said, we're going to throw in, the medicine aspect is going to come in, and AI will probably be like, hey, you need to do these exercises to prevent that type of disease because you have a family history of it. you know so it's something that is just evolving.
It's mind-boggling. And I'm here continuing my excitement because it
Yeah.
is very exciting. It's very exciting, and I think the information you mentioned. Look, uh, we need to understand really us with all this information, right? We are really like caloric intake, right? That's the word you said, caloric intake. It makes all the difference. But you can get calorie from sweet bars or a salad or from anything that has any sort of calorie in it, right? But the nutrition piece of it, how it dissolves in your body, how does it interact with the cells in your body? How does it interact with your ecosystem that lives inside of you, the bacteria? How does this bacteria have the ability to push your muscle, push your body into telling your brain that you need to eat, and these are the kind of preference that you have in your brain, and that stacks over time in your brain to say, well, you have salad option, but I haven't had salad in years. Where French fries, I had it yesterday, and I've had it for the last 30 days. How does bacteria says, well, I'm craving that, so brain creates that reaction to tell us like, hey, move your muscles, drive over to wherever that French fries is, and get that French fries for yourself. I think that's information that is not necessarily what we can talk in a doctor patient visit or even a patient and nutritionist visit, right? Because these are kind of information that we really have to know. And I'll tell you more about it. It's that the fact is that when we consume sugar, it's not necessarily because we like sugar. Our brain automatically goes into our ancestral behavior of, if you have access to sugar, have it now, because there'll be days in between that you won't have sugar. That's our ancestors' experience with sugar. But now that we have constant sugar access, our brain isn't thinking about us today in 2024. It's thinking like how our ancestors thought hundreds of thousands of years ago, because they had very limited access to sugar. And once they did, they ate all of it, like kind of ways that monkeys do today, right? So, having said all of that, I think this is the sort of underlying information that we really have to capture, and not really go down the trail of like, it's keeping up with everybody else that are around me. No, it's your ecosystem. It's your body bacterias that are, with your ecosystem, inside of your ecosystem, how things react to food, the air, even the conversations that you're having with people, right? That community. You're in Italy, you're not just having espresso, pizza, and spaghetti all day long. You're
Yeah.
walking, you're meeting up with the families, you're meeting with them on a daily basis, not necessarily in your house, but outside of your house in an environment where you are constantly there. And that plays all into your diet factor, right?
Yeah.
There's, you think about Italy. Well, Italy is Italy, but there's also part of Pennsylvania that's full of Italians. And how does that community in Pennsylvania does the same thing as they do in Italy, and probably consume somewhat a different variant of food, but still have a good, healthy life, because they have that community. They have those kind of conversations with the community on a daily basis. So their brain is more interactive with what to, you know, how to interact with the family rather than how to interact with the food, right? So we have all these variables that we can talk about and see through. And I think AI is where AI will augment us with those information, right? So it's sort of going back to that original part of the conversation, that we're learning more about ourselves
Yeah.
rather than learning more about AI. And I think with that being said, this has been an amazing conversation. The time just flew right by. And I'm so
Yeah.
thankful to you
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
bringing all those insights into the conversation.
Pleasure to be here, and I love speaking with you always. And I hope we will have some more conversations at a personal level and even in a group level. So it's an evolving thing, evolving technology, and lots more is to be seen, obviously, right? With AI and
Absolutely.
fitness
Absolutely.
and medicine and uh, where we're going with that.
Well, I can't thank you enough. Until the next episode, ay, 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 out.
Ay, 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 ay.